Today we have three panelists that I am going to invite up. We have Gary Middleton, Joe Bennett, and Charlie Anderson. They're going to come up and talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, and their experiences with organic production. And then we can open it up to questions on the floor for people as well. And
don't make me start.
hello, hello.
So this is just a recap.
If you can just give yourself an introduction
Oh,
of
okay.
who you are and some of the challenges or successes that you've seen.
Okay. Hi, my name's Charlie Anderson. I spent most of the last 8 years trying to grow organic blueberries and some other crops for Sakuma Brothers down in Skagit Valley. I work for Skagit farmers now, and so I'm living proof that those that can't do teach. And anyway, I had a great opportunity to make a lot of mistakes and learn a lot from it, and so now I try to help other people not make the same ones that I did. I worked with Joe Bennett almost the whole time, and he was a great mentor for me and for our farm. When organic started, there really wasn't anything to follow. Dr. Strick hadn't really begun a lot of her great work, which is sort of the how-to book for me now, and so we did a lot of experimenting. I would say the best thing about the organics really has been that the pricing's been very stable over a long period of time. It's been a good deal. Probably the two most difficult aspects, one was, of course, weeds, and we did a lot of work with weed mat. We got a lot of rodents under the weed mat, so there's no free lunch with any of these challenges. And the other one right now, there's maybe two, is the spotted wing Drosophila that you already heard about, and the mummyberry is a very difficult problem here because it's so wet. And those are the three biggies for me.
Okay, my name's Joe Bennett. I worked for Cascadian Farm and the Small Planet Foods division of General Mills for about 16 and a half years as the organic agriculture manager. Currently, I work for myself doing private consulting. It's interesting. Through the years, I've seen a lot of different ways of growing organic blueberries, and I'd have to say there isn't one real way to do it. I think every farm, every location has its unique situation, the soil types, and even the people who own the farm and how they like to manage it. And so, in a sense, you start to develop systems that are more appropriate for those situations. Like Charlie was saying, there are some significant problems. Mummyberry is a big one up here. If it never rained, we probably wouldn't ever talk about it or have to deal with it. You can do some variety selection to get some varieties that are less likely to have problems. But then you've really limited yourself as to the types of berries you can grow and the season you're growing them in. So, outside of maybe a straight processing scenario, that's probably not too helpful. What can people do about it? It's been a real challenge. I haven't seen a lot work really well. I can go through some research I've read. Serenade, Bacillus subtilis, when applied to stigmatic tissue is very effective when challenge inoculated. But how do you get it on the stigmatic tissue? You look at the shape of the flower, it's hanging down. The corolla has a very small opening. So you need spray technology that can move that up into there so you can get the deposition you need on the stigmatic tissue. An interesting development that I just read about, actually just yesterday, is coming out of Canada. I should say, for maybe the last 20 years, there have been people looking at bee dispersal of biocontrol agents to blossoms. A lot of that early work was to look at biological control of botrytis, especially in strawberries, using bee-vectored biocontrol agents. There's some drawbacks to that. One, how are you going to find a beekeeper who wants their bees walking in and out of these biocontrol agents? It's probably not going to do a lot for your honey sales. But it looks like there's a Canadian company that's going to now develop bumblebee systems where you can bring these boxes in to your field and then put the biocontrol agent in the kind of pathway of the bees going in and out. And so this kind of solves that problem, with contaminated honey and commercial beekeepers. But you have to buy the bees. And it sounds like an interesting program. So I'd say there are some interesting things coming up here that could be useful. Another thing that is that I've found to be a problem is the soil itself and how people prepare their fields. Many times I've gone into fields and the first thing you notice is iron chlorosis and not doing the proper field preparation to get the pH down. And in a new field, that can be a big problem because that first year, those first couple of years of growth, you really want vigor. And if you're stressing the plant in a high pH situation, you're probably not going to get it, and you risk losing plants. I would also say that looking at Bernadine's work, it's been really interesting, and I've always believed, coming from an organic background and having dealt with a multitude of crops, that having really healthy soil and good organic matter is extremely important. And I think we're just starting to get into why a good healthy soil can be beneficial to the production of crops. In blueberries, you have this association with ericoid mycorrhizae. And, you find it, in heath species, in the wild, and almost every blueberry field has them. Now, whether they're doing much for you depends a lot on how you treat your soil and how you treat your field. I've seen studies showing that fungicides can pretty much eliminate the ability of some of the ericoids to uptake nitrogen. So, and things like putting a lot of nitrogen fertilizer on can limit their ability to uptake nitrogen. But, you still need to have a decent amount so you can maintain your tissue levels. But, ericoid mycorrhizae love acid soils, they love organic matter, and they have the ability to take up nitrogen in forms other than just the NH4 form. I was just looking at a study where they looked at amino acids with labeled nitrogen, and they were able to show the ericoid taking up the amino acids and then transferring that nitrogen from the amino acids to the blueberry. And in a way that makes sense, because in a forest duff situation, it's something like up to 35% of the nitrogen, maybe even 40%, is in the form of amino acids at any given time. So there's this whole ecological relationship that's developed. So, having healthy soils is, I think, a really helpful thing to do. Plus the organic matter, all these other things, improved drainage, cycling of nutrients with earthworms moving up and down through the soil profile. There are a lot of benefits. So I think I'll just stop there and share the microphone. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Gary Middleton, and I have an organic apple, cherry, and blueberry orchard in eastern Washington. And first of all, I have to provide a disclaimer. If you're the only one from eastern Washington and you live by Alan Schreiber, you get stuck on the panel. So I probably don't have any reason to even be up here. I have been farming about 40 years, but only about 6 years in the blueberry arena. And one of the issues, obviously, we face here, and I'm very grateful to be able to come over here and have people like Charlie and Joe and Dr. Strict provide information to us, because we really don't have any sources over there in eastern Washington. Basically, it was said to me one time, you are a student and the professor. And that's a very expensive way to learn, unfortunately. One of the things we encountered over there, I think probably the primary difference between us and eastern Washington and western Washington is obviously organic matter and soil pH. Our soil pH typically starts about 8%, 8.3, and a lot of times our water will come in at over 9, which is coming down from the Columbia River system. So pH is obviously a huge issue for us, especially the first year in establishing the blueberries. If you haven't done the proper preparation and getting that soil and pH at the level that you need to have it, the blueberries will not respond. Believe me, I can show you, find plenty of examples on that mistake. I thought I had it down low enough, and I did not. You can apply a fair amount of fertilizers and other products to them, and they just don't have the ability to take them up. Certainly not as knowledgeable as Charlie or Joe here or Dr. Strick, but some of the issues that obviously we have over there that you don't have here is obviously weather conditions. We don't have the rain, so we're able to raise organic products very well because we don't have the disease pressure. But unfortunately, we also have berry softness issues with heat and overhead cooling. Right now, it's 2 degrees below zero at my farm this morning. Not exactly conducive to climatic conditions that you would desire. I'm probably going to stop right here because I think these gentlemen probably know a lot more than I do. I can tell you a lot of things that we've done wrong, but one of the things I will allude to is my particular variety is Duke, and I can tell you from experience and also following some of the advice from Dr. Strick, we have learned that they do not like fish. And we've actually burned the roots down to practically nothing, and then we threw in the 10 below zero 2 years ago, and it was almost devastating, almost wiped out the entire 12 acres that we had. We've been able to turn them around, and we're back up about 200,000 pounds. One of the things that we've learned, and this was a question I had, but I didn't get a chance to ask it, is we have now switched our format. We are not on raised beds, which I wish we were. We are organic, so we do have weed mat. We've had weed mat since the very inception. Certainly don't have the vole problems, but we have found by using the feather mill early, and we usually do 2 or 3 applications, and reducing our fish, I think we're getting a lot better response from the plants themselves. But again, we're in the learning curve. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we are going to open it up to questions from the floor or questions between you folks on the panel. Does anyone have any questions around organic production? Wow, everybody knows everything about it already. This is great.
It's your big chance, free advice.
Bernadine just asked Gary, are you acidifying your water?
Yes, we used citric acid at the very beginning, and we used it, and we reduced it down to about 5%. and felt that that was probably pretty adequate. The citric acid is extremely expensive, which you're well aware of. And so then a couple years ago, we had been working on that sulfur burner, and currently we utilize 2 sulfur burners and achieve that. I'm probably a little bit real particular, I say, how I do things. And so in my operation, not only do I utilize it through the drip, I also utilize it when I'm doing overhead cooling, and we do a substantial amount of overhead cooling during the summertime.
I just had a quick question on, I've heard nitrate mentioned a couple of times here, whether it was from over-fertilization and then it coming on mid-season or late season and screwing up bud set or your fall setup. How much does anyone look at their organic matter? Everyone talks about building organic matter and taking it higher and higher. Does anybody know of a line where you go too far where that nitrate release off of organic matter in the summer and the fall screws up your bud set? Does anybody have the magic number? 10% is too much, or?
I guess maybe I didn't understand your question. Was that about how much nitrogen we utilize, or?
Well, how much, if you raise...
The resulting nitrate that you cannot manage or you have to force management.
Okay, so, you know, you can raise the organic matter in your soil. Can you get too much organic matter to where you're getting a late season nitrogen release that may impact the formation of the fruit buds? Is that correct? Okay, I have never seen that. So if there is a number, I don't know what it is. You know, I've seen blueberries growing in peat soils, which are very high organic matter, and I haven't seen that, but I do know if you are in high organic matters, you do have to pay attention to how much nitrogen you are applying, because you're probably not going to want to put that much on.
I can just comment. I used to stop fertilizing my blueberries absolutely by the second week of July so that they don't go too green into the wintertime. That's one of the real challenges of organic growing, is that you don't have the control you have chemically, and if you put nitrogen in there, it may mineralize when you don't want it to. And so that was my rule of thumb.
Charlie, you mentioned rodents, but any of you, how big a problem are rodents, voles, and what do you do about it?
It's a big problem. I really liked the weed mat because we had big weed problems to begin with. It worked very well for 4 years or so, and I don't know if it was the mild winters back to back, but the population really exploded. I do believe they're somewhat cyclic in nature. I'll tell you what we did is we removed the weed mat so that we could get at the rodents, let the coyotes after them. You know, you're giving them cover, moisture underneath from the condensation on the weed mat, and food. It's the ideal casa if you're a vole. And we trapped them. We trapped so many that we actually used a post hole digger to make a burial tomb for them because there were just so many in the field. At one point, I believe in December, we caught 4,000 in one 5-acre block with Victor snap traps, you know, so we actually counted them. I've seen blueberry bushes blow over in the wind, and you pull them up and there are no roots left. So, and from what I have heard, since the weed mat's been removed, the numbers of the voles haven't changed all that much, but at least you can see them.
Yeah, I would add to that, you know, if you do have, if you are thinking about using weed mat, that is something you really want to pay attention to. And you want to have a system where you can open up the weed mat, and you don't need the weed mat in the wintertime. You mostly need it from the spring into the fall. But if you can open it up in the wintertime and take away that refuge for the voles, it can be helpful in limiting the population. You just don't want to let it get out of hand.
The only thing I would add to that is one of the things we've done is we've placed a lot of kestrel houses around our orchards, specifically to drive off the birds, which quite frankly did not work at all. But they are very vivacious vole and gopher eaters, and so we've got some pretty good response from that. It's certainly not, and I was at Charlie's, and when I looked at that, we couldn't suppress them under those levels, but I think it's kind of like a lot of things. If you start early and you kind of use everything, perhaps you can be successful.
Just an added comment, and I think Joe's advice is really good, is you can open up the weed mat, or I'm a little disheartened to hear Charlie's comment that the population hasn't gone down since the weed mat was removed, but when you need to replace the weed mat anyway, that might be an opportunity to leave it off for a while to try and reduce the population. But it has been a challenge for us, but like I said, we've not seen what you're describing where the plants are not anchored well or there's a yield reduction. I wanted to comment on the organic matter. I agree with Joe. I can't imagine there being an upper limit. Blueberries love organic matter, but related to the fertilizer rate, I think you need to be aware you can get away with a lot less nitrogen when you've got high soil organic matter. Not organic matter on top, but high soil. And the reason is the nitrogen stays around longer, whether you're using conventional products or organic products. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're putting too high a rate on in the spring, organic or conventional, where it's not leaching very quickly as it would in a more sandy system. And so then it's staying around longer, and you do have that risk then of mineralized and available, as well as your fertilizer and late, which is what you don't want.
Have you guys had any trial runs with compost teas for any type of disease prevention or augmentation for fertilization?
So I would say that I have not done much with compost tea. I do know a grower who was making tea not from compost. Well, it wasn't manure-derived compost, but he was using plant-derived compost and plants to make the tea from. And I would say that, did it make a difference? I don't really know. I've seen a lot of mixed results with compost tea. I think it's really one of those very complex materials. So, it's something that I think individuals play with and dial in for themselves based on what they're growing and what their problems are.
We had a tea maker and used it pretty heavily for a few seasons. No replicated trials or anything like that, but what I noticed is that when we went in and shot the plants with our tea mixture, you could go do a tissue sample very shortly thereafter, and there was no change. We didn't see any difference. If we had done that with a soluble fertilizer product, you'd see it just like that. And the only other comment would be there are some food safety concerns with some of the products that go into compost tea that make it tough for people to use if it's going to basically a customer that cares about that.
Great. Well, at that, I think we need to call it today for the organic session. So let's thank our panelists for today.